Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Forgotten Generation podcast with your host, Troy Njenje Mbanga. Today's episode is an Autism Acceptance Month special. With me today to celebrate the month are two IWIL ambassadors and guests from season 1 of the podcast, Theo and Eden. If you haven't checked these episodes, give it a listen. Also, do check out Sports for All podcast hosted by Eden on Be the Change Media Network. Theo and Eden, would you like to introduce yourselves and also describe one word about you to our listeners? Theo, would you like to go first?
Hi, I'm Theo and I'm 19 and I'm autistic and disabled and I'm a youth social activist. And I think one word to describe me is resilient.
Love that. Eden?
Yep. Hi, I'm Eden. My pronouns are she, her. I'm 21. I'm from Northern Ireland and I'm a social activist as well. And I'm also a young carer for my 18-year-old brother who has autism.
Beautiful, beautiful intros and lovely words from both of you. Well, also welcome back on the show as well. And so, and the first question I'd like to ask you both are, what does autism mean to you? And so we'll start with Eden first.
Yeah, so I think autism means to me experiencing the world differently. And I also think that having autism means that you can experience sometimes quite a lot of challenges, maybe like with communication or sensory processing. But I think that having autism can be such a superpower as well. I know my brother personally, he's really like empathetic, and there's always such a stereotype. I feel like I've always heard like autistic people can't feel emotions or aren't in tune with others' emotions, but my brother definitely is one of the most caring people I know. I also think having autism can be really special as you can often pick up on things that other people don't. And these things are often very eye-opening and interesting. And I'm also really inspired by people like both of you, who really speak out about their experiences of having autism and using the voice to make a positive difference for young people. And I think, yeah, it's really inspiring.
Wow, it's just so moving. And you're saying that, thank you so much. And Theo, what about you?
I think for me, being autistic is just who I am in a way. It's just part of me and it can be difficult. There can be a lot of challenges that come with it and there are sometimes that it can be difficult to be autistic, but I wouldn't change it because it's just me, it's just who I am. And, there are parts of being autistic that I do like about myself that I'm proud of. Like, I'm really creative and I'm really passionate about things, and especially being passionate about activism, about helping other young people. I think my autism helps me be so passionate and not giving up with that. So I think it's really good. So even though there are a lot of challenges, it's not all negative and everyone has such a different experience with it, but at the end of the day, it's just part of who you are.
Love that. Because I honestly love how you actually said it. And brings me to actually this next question is, what actually inspires you as a autistic young person?
I think other autistic people that, are making changes in the world and are just following their dreams, doing what they love, whether that's with their hobbies or careers. And I think just, yeah, my friends and other people that I know who are autistic, and I just think, if they can get through some of the challenges, then I can as well. And especially like it's amazing to see other people's interests and creativity who are autistic as well.
Love it, love it, love it. So inspiring. And so, Eden, and what does autism mean to you in perspective of someone and being a carer?
Yeah, so I've been a carer pretty much like my whole life, for my brother, but more so like since leaving school. So in terms of like my kind of role as a carer, I provide quite a lot of emotional support for my brother, as well as more practical things like making sure he gets ready for school in the morning. He also can't be left on his own, so I have to make sure that I'm home if my parents are at work during the day, as well as making sure that he gets like food and is ultimately kept safe. I also support him with school, so making sure that he gets picked up and dropped off in the afternoon, and also making sure that teachers and support staff know if anything's happened to him or if he's not going to be in school some days, because sometimes he really struggles with going to school. I think being a young carer for somebody who has autism is quite different for everybody. I have a really great relationship with my brother, and I'm quite lucky in the way that he never really causes like any major challenges, and we get on really well. However, I know this isn't always the case. I think being a carer for him has meant that our relationship has got a lot closer over the years, and it's really nice to be able to call your brother one of your best friends. And yeah.
Oh, I love that message. How your brother is your best friend and how you got that a special bond together, which I think is so beautiful. And which brings me to on the question that I have for you is like, and what has been like on the barriers as someone who cares for someone with a disability, and what has been your on experience with your brother?
Yeah, so I actually never thought of myself as a young carer. And I think that's quite common for a lot of like young people, especially who don't really know what being a carer is. They just kind of view it as different. It's kind of just like something they do and like part of their routine. So that's definitely been a barrier in terms of like getting support. I think also like within education, I didn't really get any support. And when I was applying to uni, I didn't know that you could be entitled to different carers allowances and that there was kind of more support available out there. There was literally just a tiny section on the UCAS website that I didn't know about until actually a few years ago since joining the Carers Trust. So I think more support there would be really helpful. I think as it has such an impact on young people's lives caring, especially if you have health conditions like I do, I find it can be quite hard to manage carrying responsibilities for my brother when also making sure I don't make myself more sick. So getting the balance and learning how to set boundaries has been a bit of a barrier for me. I also think care burnout is really real and often not talked about quite a lot, especially without a lot of like support and adoptions in place, like in workplaces, in unis or college. There's often a lot more carers getting burnt out and having to leave their jobs or having to go part-time or reduced hours. And this often has such a knock-on effect on relationships as well as putting more pressure on the carers because they have to worry about like financial costs. So those are some of the main barriers, I think.
I think it's such an important issue and such important like and barriers that you've raised out. I think really needs to be tackled. And so for Theo, and what are the challenges and barriers you faced being neurodiverse?
So I think a lot of the challenges and barriers affected me, especially in education. So in primary school, I was quite academic, so I didn't struggle with the work, but I did get a bit overwhelmed, a bit anxious sometimes, would struggle to speak because I have situational mutism because of my autism. And then when I went to secondary school, it was so much bigger and louder. It was a whole different place and new people, whole different like routine, and it just overwhelmed me so much. And there wasn't any support for me. And it took many years and it took my mum fighting for me a lot and, professionals that I was seeing fighting for me a lot to get any support at school because they didn't really want to listen and they didn't really want to put in the effort to support me. And I think that just made me extremely burnt out to the point that I wasn't able to go to school anymore. And I spent most of years 11, 12, and 13 doing learning at home because I just couldn't cope in school anymore. So I think that's a massive challenge, and I think there's so many different barriers, and a lot of the time there aren't the accommodations in place for people at school, and a lot of the time, like it's not that hard to put an accommodation in place, to allow someone to wear headphones or ear defenders or let someone have rest breaks during the day, stuff like that. It's so simple, but it can mean so much to people who are autistic or neurodivergent. And I think some other barriers are just people not really understanding my experience and whether that's education professionals and healthcare professionals. They often just don't really understand, they don't really take the time to listen to my needs, and so that can be quite challenging so that I can, you know, receive the care that I need or be able to do well in education. So that's quite a big barrier, and I think, you know, people just need to really listen. You know, when you're a professional, you need to listen to, you know, autistic people and understand what we need. And then that would be really good at lifting a bit of the barrier in a little bit.
Absolutely. I think it's so important. And you touched on about education and how you want education to be more better for neurodivergent people. And which brings me to, and what are the three things you want professionals, youth workers, organisations working with young people with neurodiverse, and but also do better in like because in you and others, and also the care system. So and so you touched on education. Is there any of the three things you want and people working with young people to actually and do better for you?
I think something really important is to understand that all autistic people are different and not all going to have the same needs. So just because if you're a professional and you met one autistic person and they needed certain accommodations, it does not mean that every autistic person needs the same thing. Like I was saying, you really need to just listen to that person, what it is they need, you know, listen to, if it's a young person, listen to the young person, listen to their parents, carers, listen to other professionals that know them, to really understand their needs. And I think working together with other professionals is so important because a lot of the time there's not very much communication with, like, for me, I have so many different, you know, people that I see in physical health care, mental health care, at university. And I think it's so important that all professionals work together and communicate effectively with each other so that everyone knows about the person's needs and what support they can give. Because if they're not communicating, then not everyone is going to know how they can actually help us. So I think those are my three things.
So, so important and those these things that you spoke about. And what about you, Eden?
I would probably like people to know just how hard it can be sometimes being a young carer. Obviously we do it because we love the person and like we care about them, but it's definitely not easy. Having to like juggle different commitments, work, uni, school, college, health, and it has such an impact on like all aspects of our lives. I think it's also important that professionals and education staff, as well as like bosses or like managers and workplaces are empathetic and patient with us. We might be a bit late for work or school sometimes, and we might have to leave early, but we aren't doing it to be difficult. So just doing what you can to accommodate us and trying to understand is really important. Finally, I think that there should be a bit more flexibility in terms of reasonable adjustments that can be made in different environments. For example, flexibility in attendance and also in schools. I know a lot of schools are really strict about phones, so allowing young carers to have access to their phone can really help to reduce stress. And I also think there just needs to be more education and awareness in general in schools. Maybe like a support scheme or buddy scheme in schools would be really beneficial to help them feel less supported and isolated.
Absolutely. I think it's so important. And you guys spoke and so importantly about the issues that you think are important for young people, but also yourselves. And I think it's a serious issue that I think needs to be tackled and we're professionals and actually listening to our voices. So I think you've done incredible with that. And so, and what is a Forgotten Generation podcast quote to sum up your on experience with your brother who is neurodiverse, then?
That is a really hard question. I think my kind of quote to kind of sum up my current experience has been it's obviously helped me because I've really become a lot closer to my brother, but it's also helped me to develop skills like leadership, communication, and confidence. Especially around like speaking out against injustices, not just for my needs, but also like for other people's needs. And I think those skills are really invaluable for young people to have, and can be transferred into different aspects of your life, and also in terms of like social activism as well. It's given me opportunities to get involved in different things through the Carers Trust. So I helped write the forward for their education report as well as plan an event around it. And I have a little thing just to say to like any young carers who might be feeling quite isolated in their experiences and who might be listening, just to say that it can be really like easy for you to kind of brush things off, and sometimes it can be really challenging and really exhausting, and you can often feel quite isolated from others who don't understand. But my advice would be to reach out to different organisations like Action for Children or Carers Trust or Young Care Scotland, and you can meet other young people who are going through similar experiences. So yeah, that's my kind of standing thing.
Love it, love it, love it. Like your anecdote was just incredible. So well done. I think it's so inspiring, and I really hope listeners listening in can really understand and your because like your brother's experience and why it's so important to be neurodiverse. And as for Theo, and what is your Forgotten Generation podcast quote, and to sum up your experience as a neurodiverse young person?
My quote is keep shining and don't lose your sparkle because it'll always come back. Because I think, being autistic, it does have a lot of challenges. The world can be not very accessible to us, people not understanding. But I think no matter what you go through, no matter how hard it is, you will always be able to come back. And I think just keep going and keep remembering that you are enough and you are amazing exactly as you are. You don't need to change yourself for anybody, and everyone has their sparkle in them, I think, like what's important about them and what makes them who they are. So just keep going and remember, no matter how hard it is, you can always come back to that, and you are amazing just as you are.
Wow, such an empowering quote. Thank you so much, Theo and Eden, for coming on today's on special Autism Acceptance Month episode to really talk about your lived experiences, but also empower others about you're not alone, about you are because a shining star and that you're incredible just the way you are meant to be. So thank you so much. And I also got exciting news to let you, the listeners, know that three new hosts on Be the Change Media Network will be launching their own podcast series as part of a special series on the Forgotten Generation podcast. And stay tuned for these episodes coming very soon. But thank you so much, Theo and Eden, for coming on. It's been much appreciated.
Thank you for having us, Troy. Been amazing.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's it for today's episode, and we'll be back on the next one. Bye, guys. Please support the podcast by subscribing and rating the podcast. I'd love to hear what you like and what could be better for future episodes. If you want to find me, you can find me on Instagram and I will .troy, and also on X I will _Troy. Tune in to next week's episode